Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the income statement with Zoom In on Hover. In this week's training, I'm going to show you an incredibly unique income statement with the ability to zoom in on transaction detail simply by hovering over an icon. It's going to be an incredible and unique training. I've got so much to show you, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be doing an absolute brand new from scratch zoom in on hover income statement. Now I'm going to be creating a traditional income statement, but with a twist, we're going to add in a zoom in on hover. So if we hover over a shape, it's going to show us those details. That's exactly what I want to create for you this week. You can use this on any type of report, any type of detail you want. As long as you have some underlying data that you want to show, you can use this training. So it's going to be used for any type of report, any type of graph, or any type of data that you've got. So I really want to share this with you and bring it to you, and I want to see what you can do with this. If you do like these trainings, I bring them to you each and every Tuesday. All I ask for you to do is just subscribe and hit that notification icon bell. That's going to ensure that you get the training notified each and every Tuesday. I bring these to you each and every Tuesday. And of course, it comes with a free workbook download. All you need to do is click the link down below. I've got both Facebook and both email to allow you to get those workbooks absolutely free. Of course, if you would like a lot of them, in fact, over 150 workbooks all in a single zip file, I've got that available for just $56. And that's just 37 cents per workbook. That's a great deal. That helps keep these trainings free, and I really appreciate that. All right, let's get started. We're going to call this income, do it all in capitals, income statement, and we'll give it a subheading because it is a zoom on hover. So zoom on hover. So basically what I want to do is zoom in on hover. So now that we've got the subtitle, then what I want to do is I want to have just an empty space here, and then maybe probably a date range, let's say in 3. So I'm going to be able to choose a date range here, and from several date ranges. So we'll put a drop down list here. Then I'm going to have the from date, so we can select a specific from date and a to date. So if we want to know our income records, then I'll have a couple of buttons here. Then I'm going to list out maybe just an empty space, and then we'll have something, a formula. So I want a formula based on the date. So let's call this. So I want a dynamic heading in this case. I'm going to use a formula equals, and then we'll call it income. And we'll do it up here because we're going to put that in a white font. I already have that in white font. Income statement, and then we'll call this, then, and we'll leave a space, and then right, and then we want it based on the date. So it's going to be based on this date, then then a quotation, then a space, then the word to, because we want it to, put it all in caps, and then of course we want the to dates. So it's another space, and then another and then the to date. So that's going to be there. Okay, good. We probably want to format those. Now I also want to I'm going to give it a theme color. Let's put this in a dark green. So I'm going to format those cells here, and then we'll give it just a color, and then I'll give it a fill effects. I'm going to use this theme color here. So we'll use this green theme throughout the application in this particular one, and we'll give it this fade out green. And we have the font. I've already set it at white font just to make. So let's go ahead and put in some dates here. Let's just say 1/1 and then to 12/31. So now what we want to do is we also want to format those dates, right? Because we don't want the dates shown at us. So let's format those. So how do we do that? We'll use the text format. And what is it? And of course, you can assign any type of text you want. All we're going to do is text, and then we put the format. So I'll do something like just DD / month MM and then /YYY. So that's fine, all in capitals. You can do that in small. And then let's take a look at that. That's fine. That's what I want. I'm going to copy that over here. And then we'll do the same thing. And of course, this is going to be I3. So we just have to change it to I3. Now we've got it formatted. Okay, so now we've got it based on a formula. And that's the way I like 311211. We can probably do, let's do MM. Let's do American style. There's 2 different styles, and then DD, and then I'll do it in smaller letters. So, but you can choose your own style. So either one's going to work fine for us. Great. So I like that. That's going to give us a nice formatting, and then we'll do month, day, and year. Different depends where you are. Okay, good. So we're on to that. Now what we want to do is let's format the top. We'll give it a nice fade out. Cells. Not going to be too much in here as far as the look and feel. We're just going to give it a basic and then a basic background color. So we'll just go to this green here, and then we'll do to this middle green here. And then also the line below it, the subtitle, we'll just give it a little bit of a less. So formatting those cells, and then I'll give it a fill effects. We'll do the one color, a little bit lighter green on here. So basically we've got that, and that's it. So we want our data. So when I make a change to a date, I want that to change here. So let's highlight that up, and then we'll probably go to this. That's fine. And of course, this one too, I want to also do this one too. And I'm just going to give it that cell, probably the color, this green color here, this lighter green. This one here will be sufficient. And then okay, so that's nice. That's the way I want. But this here, and these here, those are going to be able to be changed. So we're going to format those cells. I'm going to give it a white background because it's going to be editable. And I also want to give it a border. We'll use that dark green theme border here. And I'll go all the way around with this, and then I'll use a dotted line on the left one because that's going to be for, and then I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to right justify those here. There we go. They're all right justified. Format those cells. Put a border around this one and this one and this one. Our right border is already taken care of. Okay, good. So basically when we change the date range, all right, so that's what I got now. I've got some data that I've pre-filled in here. It's going to help us. Let's save what we have here so far, and then go into transactions, and I'm going to show you what we have. In this transaction list, I've got a list of income and expense transactions all the way from the current year, just a bunch of transactions. So this has the account that it's sold, like materials sold, a description of the transaction, the amount of the transaction, and the account type. Now the account type is going to be either income, cost of goods sold, or expenses. It's going to be one of those three. So what I want to do is I've got a list of account types. Materials sold is an income. We have the results. This is going to be based on the data that we have, based on, not based on this data, but based on the filter data, and I'll show you how that's going to work. So I've got a list of unique account names here and the type of each one. So I've got 4 income types here. I've got 3 cost of goods sold here, and then I've got multiple expenses here, 8 of them. So we've got that, and then what I want to do is I want to basically get all of the results based on this date and this date for any equal or greater than this date, less than or equal to this date. And I want that data, I want to take all of our original data, and I want to create, using an advanced filter, I want to have those results. The advanced filter is going to be based on these 2 dates, and we'll go over that. These are actually dates, they're numbered based on. And then what I want to do is I want to have the results show up in here. Once I have those results inside here, I want to write some formulas for a unique account. So the information is going to be here. So we're going to use formulas, and I'll go over those formulas. Then what I want is all that information based on those accounts that are here, I want to brought back into our income statement. So we want to list, of course, all the income first. Then I want to list the total income. Then I want to list the cost of goods sold, the total cost of goods sold. Then I'm going to have the gross profit down here. Now it's based on dynamically because the rows, we don't know how many income, how many expenses, how many cost of goods sold. So it's going to be completely dynamic. Then, so after I have gross profit, then I'm going to list all of the cost of goods sold, all the expenses here, and then we're going to have the total expenses, and then down here we're going to have the net profit. Now the net profit is going to be, of course, the gross profit minus the expenses. So that's how we're going to do it, and we'll give it a try. So let's take a look. Let's color all this a nice lighter green here so we can get a nice look and feel of that. So this one down here, and then we'll go down here. And those is what I want. And of course, this holding down the control, that's what I want. Okay, that's the color I want. It's going to give us a nice color. We have an income statement. So we're going to bring it down here. I want to bring this income statement. I want it to all fill. Now the first one's going to be income, of course. So we can put that in because it's not going to change. So we can put income in here. And that's what I want. So then I want to list the income accounts located right here, column E. Then we will have the total income here. So let's get that. So basically what I want to do is I want to list it, and it's always going to be based on this date. So how do I run an advanced filter based on these dates? Well, I need that criteria. This is the criteria and this is the criteria. So we have 2 criteria based on this transaction date here. We need to use and. It's got to be greater or than or equal to January 1st and less than or equal to December 31st in this case. So when we have and, we need to put it horizontally like this. We have our advanced filter criteria, our transaction date. Now notice that this is not formatted. This is the date in its original form. If we put a date here, 1/1 January 1st, and we put it back to its original form, which is in a number format, you see, or actually just a general format here, we see it's 43831. So that's what I want. When we have dates in this format, it works on run regardless of regional settings, regardless of date format. So when I send this over to you, this application is going to work regardless because we're using it. When using date filters, you want to make sure they're in this format. We don't want formatted dates because they'll always work. So basically, I'm going to run an advanced filter based on these two. Account's going to be something different. We'll focus on that in a moment. That'll come a little bit later on. So we're just going to run it. Then I want all the transactions based on those two dates, and I want them all down here. Okay? I want them all displayed here. Once I have that, we can get rid of this. I'm going to recreate it later, so I'll show you how to do that. Once we have that, then what I want to do is I want to create totals based on those. I want to know all the materials sold based on this. I want to know all the materials sold, and then I want the results. Where do I want the results account? I want it based on here, the results account. So let's take a look at that. That's a named range that I've created, and I've created a few of them. So let's get into that so you can familiarize yourself with some of those name ranges. So we're going to go into the name manager, and we see results account. So what this is a dynamic named range based on the offset. So we're going to based on AK. So that means all the transactions located in AK, however many there are going to be inside that named range. AK starting it, we're going to start it out with the header row, notice on AK2, but we're going to drop it one row down. We always want to start out with the header row because the header row always contains a value. And so if there is no data in this table, we're not going to have any issues with this named range because it's the formula is part of the header. And then we're going to do the same thing with the count. We're going to count all the transactions. We're going to include that header, and then we're going to subtract 1 because we don't want to include the header in the count number. So that's result. Then we also have the results amount, which is the amount. It's going to be the same type, but it's going to be in a different column. Here's the amount. So we've got also using offset. So basically, we can then total that based on these two results. Let's focus on just these two right now. So then we take them back into our formulas here. Then what I want to do is I want to sum if. What is the range? I'm going to read the account, so the results account, which is all these accounts, and I'm going to sum it. The criteria is going to be based on this material sold, and then the sum amount is the results amount. So this is going to allow us to sum all the material sold, not in our original data here on the left side, but in our results here. So we can use that inside. So our results have that. Then I can get a total here. Then all I have to do is just bring this formula all the way down, and it's going to see absolutely all of the calculated values here for each account associated here. Once I have this data, I can then create a report. Then I can loop through this data. When I'm creating my income statement, I'm going to loop through this data. I'm going to look for all the income accounts. If they're available, I'm going to list the materials sold. If there's a value here, I'm going to list labor sold. And so for each one of them, I'm going to do the same thing for cost of goods sold, and I'm going to do the same thing for expenses. So we're going to list them in that order. Just going to loop through this. Then what I want to do is I'm going to put the totals down. I want to put the totals for income, but we don't know how many income. In this case, of course, we have 4, but the number of incomes could be dynamic just as well as the cost of goods sold. You might have 30 or 40 of each. So we really don't know. Also, I've got a date range here. The date range is going to help us out. I've created a named range called date range here, date range. So what we do is we're going to add that right here into this date range. So we're going to do the data and then data validation equals, then we're going to put a list, this is the list type, and then equals date range. So the idea is when I select a different date range, I want those dates to change based on this date range. So we're going to have it. So that's pretty easy. So how do we do that? Let's just do something inside here so we can list out. What I want to know is I want to know the row number that third quarter is on. I want to know in this case it's 27. So how do we extract 27 from here? Well, we can do that inside match formula. So we're going to put that in. We'll call this date range row, and it's going to be equals. We're going to do if error in case so equals if error in case there's an error. We're going to use match. What are we matching? We're going to match this value, and I'm looking up the date range, that named range that we just created here. So I want the row number. So let's put in 0. So then what else do I want? I want the row number. So I have to add something. So I think it's plus 23. I'll go back and check that because I want the actual row number. Then if it's an error, I want double quotes space. So let's take a look at that. Why is it 27? Because if we look, our first date range and starts is in 24. So if this return is 1, I don't want 1, I want 24. That's why I'm going to add 23. That's how when we do the third quarter, we get 27. And that's just what we have here. So that's exactly what I want. Great. So we've got that. I've got that. Now what I also want to know is if there's a date range change, and I'll show you that in a second. Date range change. So we're going to want that. If this date range has changed, I want this to go from true or false. So let's just put in false now. And then I want one other. I also want to know the selected row. That's really the only thing that we want, selected row. When I select a row, I want a little icon to show up here. And I want that, when we hover over that icon, I want it to show all the details. What do I mean by details? I want to know all of the transactions that happen, all of the materials sold inside this period, all of the interest earned, so basically every single individual transaction. So what we're going to do in that case is we're going to run an additional advanced filter. We're going to be basing it on this account right here. And if we have a number, so once we add in a selected row, what we're going to do is the account number is going to be here, and then we'll select it. But that's going to be based on the selected row. Let's say if it's 10, it's going to show that row here. So keep that in mind. So this will show our account number. We're going to create an advanced filter based on this account number. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take all this data. I'm going to extract only, for example, if we've selected materials sold, I'm going to extract only materials sold. And then I'm going to bring it inside this. I want those results to be here. So for example, only materials sold, and I want to display here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little picture of this, and I'm going to display it on hover. So when we hover over it, the first thing we need to do before we get ahead of ourselves, I need to actually create that income statement. So let's write a macro to create that income statement. So we're going to go into the developers, into Visual Basic. Alt F11 is a shortcut there. I'm going to be writing all this code with you, but I've just got some names to help us move us along. So there's some names of the subs to let us know. Okay, so what's the first thing we want to do? I've dimensioned some rows already. And so the first thing what I want to do is I want to know an income statement row. I want to keep track of whatever row that we're going on here. So as we move down, we need to keep track of what row we're on. It's going to be called the income statement row. Next up, we have the last transaction row. We're going to be running an advanced filter based on the transaction. So that advanced filter, we're going to need to know that last row, and it's going to be here in our original transactions right here. So in fact, this case, the last row is 367, but we're going to need to keep track of that. Okay, so what else do we need? I also need to know the last result row if we're getting results, and the account row. So we're moving through the account row, so we need to know that, and that's important. And we're going to be looping through the account rows. The account rows, we need to loop through them, and that's these starting from 3 all the way to 17. So we have to loop through those, so we need to keep track of what the account row is. So let's get into writing some code, and we'll start it out with this refresh so we can actually build in that income statement dynamically. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to write some code right here under this. So the first thing we're going to focus on is with sheet 1. Of course, we're using sheet 1, so that's really important. That's the sheet that we're going to get most of our. I also want to clear out any contents, right? We have to clear out any values that are currently in here. So we're going to clear out. We don't need to clear out this. It's always going to start with an income. So I'll clear out from all the way from D7 all the way through K and then down. So we'll just write them dot range D7 through, and then all the way through K, and then the last row we can use. So K, and then we'll just use a large row. That should be fine. 99, and then not value but clear contents. Okay, so that's going to clear existing port data. So now that we've cleared it out, now what we can do is I want to get the last transaction row. Remember on sheet 2 we need to know the last transaction row. So the last transaction row is going to be equal to, and that's going to be sheet 2, and I'm using auto hotkey for that. So if you see that automatically type, it's auto hotkey. Sheet 2, and then of course A. Actually, we're not using A, we need to use D. Why is that? Because our data, for some reason I put this in D. So let's say our transaction, all right, B, we can use D, B, D, or anything like that. Actually, it should be B. I want the last transaction. I'm going to make that B because I want to get the last row. So let's go ahead and make that B. That's our first row. It's our date. That's a required field. You always want to use a required field. That's the last transaction row. So now what we're doing is we're ready to also want to clear, and just in case I want to clear, generally when you run an advanced filter, VBA will clear the results. So I'm going to clear all these results starting from AJ3 all the way through AN and then just down. So we're going to clear all those. Just, it says safety, but sometimes you don't have to do that, but I like to do that. Sheet 2 dot range, and then what, of course, we're going to do ANJ through AN, and then we'll just do a 999, and then we'll clear those contents, clear contents, clear results. Okay, so clearing the old results is always a good idea. So now we're ready to run our advanced filter, and let's drop this down so we can see the actual data. And we're going to bring this over here. We're going to run our advanced filter starting on the headers, going from B through F, and then all the way down. So sheet 2 dot range B2 through F, and the last transaction row dot advanced filter, running advanced filter, and we're going to copy that, And then we're going to put the criteria range equals to sheet to make sure you specify the sheet dot range. And then our criteria is going to be based on those dates, right? So let's take a look at those dates. Our criteria is right here, located here. So it's going to be AA2 all the way through AB3. That is our criteria. So that's what we want to do. AA2 through AB3. Okay, that's criteria. Next up, I want to copy to range. And what is the range that I want to copy it to? And of course, that's going to be where our results are going to go, which is going to be sheet2 dot range AJ2 through AN2. That's where we're going to bring our results. And then, of course, I want unique equals true. So we're going to have unique equals true. That's our advanced filter. So that's where our results are going to come right here, all the way from AJ2 through AN2. Make sure these headers are exactly the same. That's really important. So moving on, now that we have our advanced filter, now we can get our data. So let's pull it up here. So once we have those results, we want to make sure, we want to get the last results row. So let's put the last result row is going to be equal to, and then we'll use, of course, we use AA, we can use A, but we want to use the results starting in AJ, actually AJ. So let's get those right in here, inside the code here, equals, and then we'll do AJ, and that's going to get us our last results row. That's the last results. Now we just need to run a check to make sure that we have results. If the last result row is less than 3, then go to, let's just put no data, right? I want to skip all of that and go to no data. Nothing else we could do here if there's no actual data, so we can move down, although there should be data. We can also exit the sub. There's nothing else to do, so we can probably exit sub. Okay, there we go. All right, okay, now moving on. Now what's the next thing now? Assuming that we actually have data, we can now move on. So we can set the first IS row, the first income statement row. What's the first row that we're going to be putting information in? It's going to be 7. That's the first row. We have income. First row is going to put in the income right here. So 7, we're going to set 7 as our first row. So let's do that here. IS row is equal to 7. So we're going to set initial income statement row. So now that we've set that out, first we're going to start adding in all the income accounts. Add in all income accounts. So to do that, we're going to run that loop. As I mentioned to you before, right, we're going to start that loop, and I'm going to run it all the way from basically here to here, from 3 to 17. I'm going to look at this type here. If it's income, then I'm going to add it. So that's what we're going to do. So let's run our loop, start it out. So we have a variable for that, for account row equals 3 to 17, because we really don't know where our accounts, although we know them in this case, equals 3 to 17, and then always close our loop, next account row. Okay, so once we're inside that loop, I want to check to see if it's income. If sheet2.range M and the account row dot value equals income, just the way we have it in there, then we're going to do something. Okay, then what are we going to do? We also want to make sure, actually more than that, not only that, I just want to make sure that there's actually a value here, because if there's the 0 here, I want to skip it. So not only do I want to know if it's income, but I also want to make sure that the value is greater than 0. So let's also write in an and for that. And sheet2.range, in this case, and of course the account row dot value is greater than 0. Then, okay, so that case, in those two, so n and the account row is greater than 0. We want to make sure there's a result sum. We want to make sure there's a balance here. But then I want to add it. So how do we do that? So the first thing I want to do is I want to take this information and I want to add it right in here. I want to put it in E. So let's do that with this line of code right here. Dot range E, and what row? IS row dot value equals sheet2 dot range L. It's coming from L, right? It's going to come. We're going to put it inside E, but it's coming directly from here. I want that account name. It's going to come from column L. So that's where we're going to put it. L and the account row dot value. That is going to be the account name. So we've got that. Now I also want to put the amount too. Where do I want to put the amount? I'm going to put the amount probably right here in J. Let's put it over here right in J. So I want to do that. So let's do that. In fact, we can just copy that and make some updates to the code. So I'm going to copy this here, And then we're just going to update both the columns. Okay, so in this case, this is going to be amount. And the amount, of course, is going to go into J, but it's coming directly from N. Let's take a look at that here, coming directly from N. So, okay, so we have that. Now we've got that. And so that's going to list out for all of our income accounts. So, but each time we need to make sure that we're incrementing the IS row, the income statement row. IS row is equal to IS row plus 1. Increment row on income state, that we need to increment that 1. Okay, so that's it for our loop. That's all we need to do as far as the income accounts, except now the last thing I need to do for income accounts, I just need to put in a total. So what I want to do is in here in column D, I want to put total income, and then I want to put the total income, the actual amount located in K. So K is what I have. But I also have it already in named ranges, so I made it really easy. How do I do that? How do I know the total income? Well, let's take a look at the name manager, and I have total expenses, total income, right? So what is that? Let's take a look at the total income, and of course I have total cost of goods sold. So let's do that. Transactions, what is that? It's going to equal Q2. What's Q2? Here's our summary. I've summarized it all up. So let's take a look at that. It makes this a lot easier. So when we go back into the transactions, we take a look at income. We see income is the sum of N3 to N6, right? We could also do a sum if. And this is another way to do it. So let's say we want to do a sum if because we don't know where our income is. We could do something like this. Sum if, and in this case, right, we just do one condition. And in this case, our range would be here. And then we could do based on income, comma, and then income. And then what's our sum range? Our sum range is right here. This as well will get a sum if. We'll do just fine as well. That's going to get us our sum if. So either one, either this one, I just did undo, Control Z or Control Y. Both of those are going to get us the same amount. So this way income could be anywhere inside that. Either one is going to good. And then of course you can just bring this down, or you can do instead of this, you can just do it just like this. Instead of putting the word income in, you can actually just use it right here because it's exact, as long as it's written exactly the same. There. Now what we can do is we can just copy, we can bring it right down here. Paste those formulas in, and of course not in gross profit. Copy it down here, paste it, formulas in here for cost of goods sold, paste the formulas here for expenses, and you have everything you need. So that's it. That's all you have to do. Now all we need to do is create named ranges for that. So I've done this. Total expenses is here. Total cost of goods sold is here. So now all I need to do is take that named range and just place it right in here where we want our totals to go instead of having to add it up here. It's a much easier way of doing it. So let's take a look how we would do that. So the first thing what I want to do is next line of code, I want to put in total income. I want that total income to go here. So let's do that inside the code. So we have dot range D, we've already added one. We're already on the additional one, D, and the IS row dot value is equal to the total income. So here it is, total income. That's all we want, the name, that's just the text for total income. And now we want to actually enter the amount. So dot range, and where do I want to put that? I'm going to put that in K. I want to put that at the end. K in the same row, and IS row, I'll just capitalize that, dot value is equal to, what is it? Sheet 2, that's where it's located, dot range, the named range, total income, dot value. There we go. That's the total income value. Much easier. All right, good. So now we're ready for our cost of goods sold. But let's go ahead and skip 2 rows. So IS row is equal to IS row plus 2. Now we're skipping a row. Now we're ready to go for the, now we're ready to add in the cost of goods sold. So let's add in. So let's write a little comment here. Add in COGS, cost of goods sold, cost of goods sold. Now we have that, and now we're ready to add in information. So dot range D is where we're going to put it, and of course the IS row. Dot value is equal to cost of goods sold, equal to, and then we'll just put in COGS. Good. So now we have that label, and then of course we want to increase that row again. So we'll just copy this and then just paste it down here. We're going to increment that row one more time. Okay, so now we're going to add in all of the cost of goods sold, and it's going to be very much the same. So why don't we just copy all of this right in here and just paste it down here and to make the updates necessary. So add in this case, of course, is not income. We're focused on cost of goods sold. So we have a 3 to 17. In this case, of course, it's not income. We need to change that to COGS. And of course, and everything else is the same. This is the account name, the increment row, everything else is the same. Very nice. Okay, so that's much easier now. We can just copy and paste because now we're doing a cost. Okay, so what next? Now I want to add in the totals for cost of goods sold. So we can do the same thing, but here I'm going to copy and paste what we did for total income. I'm going to paste it down here, but of course I'm going to change this up. Instead of income, we're going to go cost of goods sold, and then text of total of income. Total. And then total, of course, we're going to change that, right? Our named range is not income, it's total COGS. That's our named range, total COGS. Just updating those much quicker. And then we're going to put in the same information, total cost of goods sold, total, and incrementing the row 2. Perfect. So we're almost done with this. Okay, but after the cost of goods sold, what I really want to do, just on one line below, actually, I want to put in the total profit amount, the gross profit amount, and I want to put that in here. So in D, I want to put in something like gross profit or total gross profit in D, and then in K, actually all the way in K, I want to put in the actual gross profit amount. Now we have the gross profit right here, and it's called gross profit, so that's what we're going to do. In fact, we can copy that name, and then we're going to bring it down here. So now let's go ahead and write that in inside our code. So in D, in fact, we can just copy this here. I'm going to copy this right here, and then I'm going to paste it in, of course, and then we're going to update that accordingly. And in this case, D is going to be the total gross profit. Total gross profit. Great, so we can change the text total gross profit. It's pretty self-explanatory there. And then the amount, of course, in column K, it's going to be gross profit right here. So gross profit, that's the name range we created. Double check that, so I want to make sure our named range is here. Formulas just go into the transactions. So now we've got our gross profit here, which is correct. All right, so next up, all we need to do is just run it, add in our code, add in our expenses, and we'll be done with that. So let's take a look at that. So now we're ready to add in our expenses. We'll just want to increase it one more row. We need to increase it one more row as we're moving down. So let's copy that and paste that down here. And now we're going to ready to add in our expenses. Okay, so in column D is going to go our expenses. So all we need again is just copy this and change it to expenses. So bring it down here. And then we're going to change this to expenses. So now we've got D in the IS row as expenses. Now we've listed the title. Now we can continue again. We're going to increment that row one more. We want to drop it down. That's only for the list. Now we're ready to add in those expenses. And of course, it's going to be the same thing. Again, here, our same. All we need to do is copy this loop right here and then just change it to expenses. So here, then just instead of cost of goods sold, we're focused on expenses. And of course, we can put the account in this expense account. Now we've added in our expenses, going to loop through that, add in expenses. I want to add in, of course, our total expenses. So just like we did total income, we're going to add in total expenses. So all I need to do is just copy up here, just as we did with income, but we'll change it to expenses. And then bring it down here. And then what we're going to do is just change this to total expenses. And then, of course, our named range that we have that contains that total, it's called total expenses. Let me double check the name on that in the transactions. Go into our total expenses, called total expenses. Of course, you can always copy that just to make sure you're right. And then you want to go back into the code here and then just paste it in here to make sure you got that named range right, which is correct. Okay, so of course, that's total expenses. Now that we have the total expenses and we're ready to move on, so we can just actually increase it one row because below that I actually want to put in the net profit inside D. So we're going to copy this just as we did here, and then I'm going to paste that in here. Beats us. Instead of D is going to be not the total gross profit, but this is going to be the net profit. So total net profit. So we can change it here, total net profit. And then of course we also have the net profit named range. We'll double check that named range here and we'll put in total net profit. Okay, some of these names are getting to, this is total net profit. I don't want you to get confused. Total gross profit. Just update these comments here. And then of course we have total cost. Okay, so that's going to be good. Okay, so K is going to contain our net profit. That's it. That's all we pretty much have to do. We'll check it for bugs, of course. I'm going to save it here, bring it up here, check it, and then what we'll do is we're going to add some buttons, some icons, and make this thing look a little bit better here. But let's run this code here and see what we've got here. If there's any issues in here, usually there's a few bugs here. Copy to range, no double T's in there. Okay, copy to range. Continuing on, let's take a look in values. Dot range dot value equals. Okay, we got to have the equals. Great, I made that mistake on all the way down now. All right, we got to do that every time I copied and pasted. I mess it up each time. Brilliant. But before you copy and paste, you want to make sure you don't mess it up 5 times. So let's see, I think we got it all right. Now we got that equals, one more here. And okay, we're good to go. I think that's it. Let's continue on. And one more. Clear contents. Let's double check that. AN, our results, actually AN3, right? We want to make sure it's AN all the way AJ3 through AN3. Okay, so let's make sure that's a 3. Clear the results. AN3 all the way through AJ. We want to clear those results there. Clearing AJ3 all the way through AN and down. Okay, so we've got that. Let's continue on. Check your bugs. Okay, we're good to go. Let's go ahead and save that and see what our results are. What else do we got? Oh, we got one more thing. This is sheet 2, right? Sheet 2, right? Because we're focused on with sheet 1. So let's continue on now. Okay, let's take a look here in the income statement here. I like it. Let's take a look. Income, we have it. We need to add some conditional formatting, some buttons, cost of goods sold, materials, right? Total cost of goods sold. Gross profit is here. Expenses, our expenses aren't. I think we need to change it. Total expenses. Let's take a look what happened. I think I know what happened. Expenses, right? If we take a look at this here. Expense, not expenses, right? Make sure you get your names right. So this is expense, not expenses. That's probably where we messed up. So take a look down here. Expense, not expenses. Okay, fair enough. Continuing on, let's take a look now. I think we've got it. So now we've got our expenses listed, but we definitely need some conditional formatting. This is quite ugly. We don't want it to look like this. Let's make this a little bit of a lighter color generally, just a little bit lighter than what we have. I'm going to go back into the home, take a look at this. I want more colors. I just want to choose a little bit lighter color, very almost like white, so that our data stands out. That's what I want. Now we're going to add some additional conditional formatting, and I want to add some buttons in here. So let's take a look. I've got some buttons. Why don't we add some shapes? I want to add 2 buttons, one for refresh the report, might not be entirely necessary, and I want another one to print the report, so we'll put that here. And then I want another one. Let's take a look here, give it a format, something closer to the theme, which would be here, and then we're going to call this refresh, and then what we'll assign it, let's drop this down here and then go into the home, right side in the middle, and then I'll add the icon later. I'm going to duplicate this, Control D, and I'm going to call this print, just so we can get it in here. Just give it a short name and print. So I want to print that. So that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to bring these to down, just some small buttons. They're both width 0.8 should be enough for both of them. And let's put in some icons now. All right, so I'm going to insert a picture. I've got some pictures saved up here. Why don't we do these? I want all of these. Let's bring those down to a reasonable size. Let's do 0.3 for now, and then we'll make them a little bit bigger or smaller as we need them. This is going to be our icon for our sheet. So I'm going to put this here. That's going to be the income statement here. And then I want the printer and the refresh a little bit smaller. Those are going to go into the button. So we'll make those 0.2. Perfect. Now that's going to go on the print. It's kind of small, but it's okay because we wouldn't have a lot of space. And the refresh, that's what I want here. I'm going to hold down the control on all of these, and I'm going to align them vertically here. Okay, so now we've got the refresh. We can make this button a little bit bigger, 0.85. So we've got the refresh there. That looks nice. And then I'm going to hold down the control. I'm going to group those, and we're going to call this refresh button. Refresh button. Always a good idea to name range. And I'm going to do the same thing with this print here. Zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. Holding down the control and then grouping them. We'll call this print button. And we'll create a macro for that. So we've got a little bit to do this. Now I've zoomed out a little bit. This one's going to be for our zoom. What I want to do is when I select a line, I want this zoom icon to show up. And when we hover over that, I want to display the details of that. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller, something similar to the same line height. So go into select it, go into the shapes format, probably 0.2, not too big. That should be good. I want that. So let's continue with it. Let's add some conditional formatting, and then we're going to go into our zoom feature, which is going to be really cool. So what kind of conditional formatting? Well, basically I want to know for our items here. So total income, I want to highlight total income, all the totals. Now all the totals are located here. And our gross profit is located here. So actually I'm going to put, I really want the totals. Let's put the total income, total cost of goods sold, and total expenses. Let's put those in J, not K. I want to update that on the code. I like them in different rows a little bit. So let's just update that. So total expenses, the amount, right? It's going to go into J, not K. We're going to keep the net profit and the gross profit in K. So I'm going to update that to J. I want to update this one right here, the total cost of goods to J, and of course the total income also in J. That'll give us that way we can make some better distinctions. between that and the total income on J. I like that a little bit better. I'm going to run that macro. And then we're going to go down here. Okay, so I like that, but I definitely need to do conditional formatting. I only want the gross profit and the net profit. That also helps us for conditional formatting. So let's highlight everything down here. And what we'll do is we'll do conditional formatting. So now what do I want? I want the total income to be highlighted. So I'm going to do conditional formatting, a new rule, and I'm going to base it on something. Now what's unique about the total income? Total income has a value located in D, and it has a value located in J, right? Notice the other ones don't. The gross profit has a value in D and located in K. So that's why we have that distinction. So let's do that. Use a formula. It's going to be and. There's two different requirements, right? A equals, and what is that? It's going to be something, a value has to be in D, but not, it has to be in every row, so it can't be absolute. So D6 does not equal empty. We'll do, and what else? So comma, and also in J6 does not equal empty. Again, for every single row, so we have to remove that, does not equal empty. In that case, I want to give it some additional color, some additional formatting. So I'm going to format it. I'm going to go into the fill, and let's give it a little bit of a darker green like this, and then some borders around it, maybe some top borders, maybe some darker green top and bottom borders. And let's take a look at that, and then click apply. Yeah, that's what I like. Nice. Okay, so now what I want to do as far as the totals are concerned, I want to color the gross profit and the total net profit a little bit darker. I want them to stand out. And I actually should make these bold too. So make them bold and make them stand out. So let's do that. Again, we're going to highlight the entire range here. I'm going to go back into conditional formatting. I'm going to manage rules. I'm going to make one adjustment to this just to make it bold. So I'm going to go into the format here in the font, and I'm going to make it bold. I like that. One more thing, what I want to do now, I want to add a new rule, and this is actually, we can cancel out of this something. We can edit this rule and just copy this rule. Now we go into the new rule, use a formula, and paste in that, but they're slightly different, right? It's going to be based on K, not J. So this time it's K. Column K is what I want to there to be a cannot equal empty. So format that. This time I want to fill, but this is a little bit of a darker fill, right? We can do that, a little bit darker fill here. And again, also a border on this using the same border here. And I think we use that color there. And also we want the font to be bold. Bold here. Okay, so let's take a look at that. That's going to stand out a little bit more. Notice we have two different colors here, and then click apply. Good, that's what I want. So now our net profit and our gross profit have different colors, and our total income, total cost of goods sold, and total expenses also have it. And we'll just check our math equals sum, and then we'll just go down here and double check that our expenses equal 158 here, and we make sure that they do. So they do. So that's working good. So we know our totals are looking good. Now all we want to do is when I select a row, I want this to appear here, and then when I hover over this, I want the details of whatever's labors. Great, but since we've already created the macro for refresh, we can just assign the macro here, and then we're going to call income statement refresh here. So now when we click it, it's going to refresh. And also when we change the dates, we want this to, we've got a few things to do. Let's do that now. Let's get this updated so that we're actually changing the dates. It's going to change the dates on here. So we're going to write a macro. Now, when is that macro going to run? Well, that macro is going to run when we make a change to E, then I want these dates to change, okay? So let's highlight these so we know that they're separate, and then we're going to put some borders around it so we can keep that consistent, and then I'm going to make these on the left justify those so we know. So basically what I want to do in this case is when we make a change here, I want to determine what row this is in, and whatever row this is in let's say it's in row 26, I want to place whatever's here, the from, I want to place it right in here. And in the 2, basically whatever else is here in the 2. Okay, so that's how we do it. That's going to be on a change event. So let's take a look at that inside the code. It's going to be a worksheet change event. So if we click here, we're going to focus on a worksheet, and then we're going to not selection change, but change event. So change event, what is it? We're going to focus on a specific cell. So if not intersect, which cell are we focused on? Inside this, inside sheet 1 here, we're going to focus on E3. So when we make a change to E3, we also want to make sure that, remember, if this is an error, it's going to show up blank. So I need to also make sure that B3 is not blank. We do need a row for that. So we're going to check both those. And range B3 dot value does not equal empty. Then what do we want to do? Then we want to do a few things. So it's not, of course, it's not H12. We're really focused on here E3. So the first thing what I want to do is when I make a change to here, I also want it to refresh. So if I just change the date here to 2/1, I want this report to refresh automatically. But when I make a change to here, I want both this and this to change. So if VBA makes a change to here and here, the report's going to refresh automatically 2 times. I don't want it to refresh 2 times. So I need to differentiate between the change that we make here when VBA changes here and here, or when the user makes a manual change to one of these. So how do we differentiate? Well, I'm going to use this here, B4. It's going to tell us when we change this, this is going to go to true. And then when we finish, it's going to go to false. And that way we can know if it's not. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So let's do that right now inside the code. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to take B4 and make it false. Range B4 dot value equals false. And then I'm just going to copy this, and before we're done, before the end if, we're going to make it true again. So let's go click here, drop it down, equals true. Inside here, what I want to do is determine what row. I want to dimension, let's just call it date row as long. And that date row, we need to make sure, of course, is in B3, right? We know B3 is not empty, so date row is equal to range B3 dot value. Okay, that's the date range row. So once we have that row, then I can then place it in G3, range G3 dot value is equal to what? Sheet 2 dot range, and then we just have to look, what is the range we're focused on? It's going to be, in this case, M, and then 2 is going to be N. So M and the date range row. So M and date row dot value, and this would be the from date. And now we can just pretty much copy that and update it to the different ranges. Copy that, and this is going to be for the to date. So this is going to be N, coming from N. And now, of course, instead of G3, it's going to be I3. That's what we're going to focus on. That is where our to dates, I3. So the last thing, what do we want to do? Once we change the dates, I actually want to run the macro to refresh, right? I want to run this macro right here. This one right here, because once we change the date, so that's it. So copy that, go into here, right click, paste it. Now when we change the dates, it's automatically going to update. So let's take a look at that, save our work, change it. Now we just double click on this if I want to keep this month. Now we've got this month. Now we've got first quarter. Notice the dates change. And now this year. Great, that's what I want. And let's see, last year I don't think I have any data. Perfect, no data on last year. There's no data, it's all for this year. Okay, good, so that's just what I want. Now we've got it just right, but I also want to make a change. If I change this, I need to also then run this. So let's do that on G3 or I3 change. So let's write a few lines of code for that. Also going to be on the worksheet change, we're going to write it down here. So if not, and that's auto hotkey that automatically types that for me to help me. So we're focused again, let's bring this up here, and we're focused on either G3 or I3. So inside that, we can go G3 or I3 is nothing. And one other condition, right? We want to make sure that B4 is equal to false. So let's copy this because we don't want to change it. And B4 is false, then what do we want to do? Then income statement refresh, then run this. That's that easy. Now when we make a change to here, it's automatically going to update. 1-1, this should be false, true. Got those reversed. Perfect. Now we've got it. Now we've got it here. This, now we change this, now change this. That's what I want. Okay, so it changes to true, then it changes back to false. Inside the code, had those reversed. Changes to true, back to false. And then only if there's a change of these, and only when B4 is false, we're going to refresh the statement. That's exactly how I want it. If I just want a single month, I can do just that for a specific month. Now we've got to refresh. Perfect. And of course, just click this here again, it's going to update the date. Awesome. So what I want to do now, when I select a specific row, I want to kind of highlight that row that we're selecting, and I want this icon to appear here. When I hover over this icon, I want to show the details. How do we do that? Well, the first thing is we want to write a selection change. If the user makes a selection anywhere from, let's say, D7 all the way through K and then down, I want to put that row right in B5. So let's do that. Let's write some code for that first. So that's under selection change. So again, if not intersection, of course, we're focused here on D7, and we're going to go all the way to, let's say, K and then 99999. Okay, just so in case we nothing. And what else? We also want to make sure, I want to make sure not just on any selection, but I want to make sure that there's actually a value in column E. E has to contain a value, right? If E doesn't contain a value, there's probably nothing else. So let's make sure that nothing and range E and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. We need to make sure that then what do I want to do? Then I want to do a few things. The first thing what I want to do is I want to put the row, the selected row located in B5. So let's do that. B5 is going to take on that. So range B5 dot value equals the target dot row. That's the selected row. So let's just check that. Now that we have that, okay, notice it changes. But now what I want to do is I want to add some conditional formatting so that we know it's clear what row we've selected. So I'm going to highlight this, go down to our range, back into the conditional formatting, new rule, use a formula. This is the formula equals B5 equals row. When that happens, then what do I want to do? I want to format that, and let's color the border here and give it a specific color, maybe a light green, something really, really light, and then we'll just color this top and bottom like that. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's kind of nice. So we can see that the row's been selected. Notice it doesn't work on anything else. It only works on when there's a value here. That's what only when there's a E contains a value. If E is nothing, then we don't. So now what I want to do is I want to get this icon to show up also on the selected row because it is this icon. But not only this icon, right? I want to hover, right? And if there's no such thing as a macro on hover. So if I hover over this, I can't do anything, only when I click on this. But I want this detailed show when I actually hover on that. So how are we going to get something to happen on hover? Well, the best way to do that is to enter usually an ActiveX and some type of ActiveX component. And what we can do is we can enter an ActiveX component like this. If I enter an ActiveX component and I double click on here, and I see it says label 1. Now I click on mouse move, and now it says the mouse move, and I put in message box test. So now when I run that over, now keep in mind there's one important thing. In the developer, nothing's going to happen. This is design mode. Nothing will happen while you're designing. Once you get out of the design mode and you hover over it, notice this test. So I know that I can have something happen on hover. Watch this again, hover. Great, so that's what I want to do. So let's drop this down because we're going to be going in and out of design mode a lot. So we understand that, but what I really don't want to see is I don't want to see this label. So let's go into the properties here. And the first thing I want to do is let's just call this, I'm going to give it a specific name on this. Let's call this show details. And we're going to make another one that's going to be called hide details. So let's take a look at that. So show details, but I want to make it a specific size. I don't want to make it too big. So let's give it a specific width and a specific height. So the width, let's say 25, and the height, I want to do the same, the height 25. And I also don't want to show any frames. See the backstop? I want this transparent. So I'm going to double click on that. I'm also going to remove the border and we're going to remove the caption. We don't need that. So the idea is, now we can't see it. Let's add a border, at least until the end. We're going to add a border for now and then we're going to remove it at the end. So I'm going to add this border. I'm going to bring it over here. So basically what I want to do is I want to center it right over that. Perfect. So when I hover over this, I want something to happen and I want that edit. So that's exactly what I want to do. And now I want to hover outside of it. I want it to disappear, right? So hover over it. So how do we do that? How do we hover over something and then we go outside, it disappears? Well, we can do that with another shape. So I'm going to duplicate this using Control D and it's going to duplicate this, but this one I want bigger. This one's going to be a lot bigger. So I'm going to make this about 60. Let's say maybe 60. Yeah, 60. The bigger, the better. And then we'll make this about the 62. So the height and width are about 60. And then I'm going to place this. And I also want to send this to the back, right? So I'm going to do the format and then send backward and send to the back. So this one I want back. And this one, we're going to give it a specific name. We're going to call this one, we're going to call this hide details. Okay, so I've got show details here. Let's just bring it over here. I've got show details here and I've got hide details. So when I hover over this bigger shape, it is going to hide the details. When I hover into the smaller, it's going to show the details. So that's what I want to happen. And I need to center everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection tool and then I'm going to select everything and I'm going to center it vertically and horizontally here. Now what I want to do is I want to create a group because I want to display that group specifically. So I'm going to group it like this. Now to name it, sometimes you can name it here, but it doesn't really work here. Notice that it doesn't work, right? It didn't work. It just named a range. But if we want to name it a named range, we can use the selection pane. So I'm going to click on the selection pane here, and here's our group here. And we're going to call this details group. Now that we've got that, so basically what I want to do is when I make it, let's get rid of the selection tool and we can unhide that for now. So when I select here, I want this details group to show up on the row. Exactly. So how do we do that? Well, we can add it in. So let's go back into the code here on our selection change. We don't need this anymore. We've already changed the label, so we're going to update that. We don't need this anymore. We're going to update that in a minute. So basically when I select it now, also I want to display that details group. So with shapes details group, I want it to display. What do I want to do with that? Well, the first thing I want to put in a dot left position is going to equal to, and where do I want to put it? I want to put it right about where it is now, somewhere right around here, or maybe to the left. So somewhere in, let's say, column K, and then we'll move it over a little bit to the right because it's only going to be, so right around to the outside, column K would be just fine. So let's take a look at that. So equals range K and the target dot row dot left, and we can adjust it a bit. What we want to do plus, so it's going to be this larger group, right? So basically what I want to do is I want to place these borders. Remember, this border and this border, you're not going to see in a few minutes. We're going to hide those, but we're just using them now. We're going to hide those borders. So I really want that icon here. So actually we want to display it in K, but then I want to move it left because we're going to focus on this. So actually I want to move it to the left of K. It should line up just right because it's the larger group. So we'll do -20 and then we'll adjust it accordingly. And then also we want to do a top position, right? So the dot top is going to be equal to also range K and the target row, and then dot top, and then what else do we want to increment or move it a little bit away from that? So if we take a look inside, if it's right on the top, it's going to appear way down here because the top of this is going to be the top of the row. So I actually have to move it on up, probably about 40 or 50 or something like that. So probably let's just do -40 on that, and then we'll adjust the size accordingly. So something like -40. Okay, and then the last thing I want to make it visible, dot visible. Now, if the user selects anything else, if they select anything on here, I really want it hidden. I don't want this shown. So if they select anything, if it's visible, I want it hide. Only if they select inside this do I want it shown. Otherwise, hide it. So if it's visible, hide it. That's the first thing that I want to do first. Let's put that up here. If shapes, we can actually, I copied it, so we can do if shapes dot visible equals true, then what we're going to do, shapes dot visible equals, this is what this is going to do, MSO false. What this is going to do is first it's going to hide it regardless of what they select. Then it's going to show only if they select on places we want. Hide, edit. Moving around. So let's go ahead. So now when I want to select, I want it to show up. So let's just update. All right, now we got a equals and we got to show it visible. True. Okay, so let's go back in and pull out of design mode. Now let's take a look at the position. It's too high up, so we could drop it down -20, and remember those borders are not going to show up. It's not going to be ugly like that. Let's try -20 and see where that leaves us. Probably a little bit too low, so we can adjust that. Let's take a look. That's almost a little bit, we want a little bit higher up. I'm focused on this icon, right? So a little bit higher up. So moving a little bit higher would be maybe 25. So let's get rid of the borders. We don't need them, but what I want to do is when I hover over them, when I hover over this one, I want to show this edit thing. So what do I want to show when I edit? Well, what I want to show is the history of the edit, right? When I click on here, I want to show the history. So how do we do that? I want to show the entire detail. So that's just a little bit of macro. So again, what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter. Now we see that we have the account labor sold. Why is this? How did I get that in there? Well, we have a row here. I have the selected row. If I know that this is selected row 8, and I want to index this, and I want to know what is in 7, all I need to use is an index. So let's take a look at that since I know the row and I can index column E. So let's take a look at this criteria because it is this criteria. As we select, notice this says materials sold, but if I select on something like interest earned, it's automatically going to change. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to index income statement all the way from 1 to 999. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change it to income statement B5. This is the row number. We know the row number is already placed. And then column 1. So whatever is based in this row, as long as we're indexing the entire column starting in row 1, we can return exactly the account that we selected. And it is this account that I've got the criteria. So now what I want to do is I want to determine the last row of our results. And I have our criteria, so I want to return only those accounts where interest is earned. And I want to take that and I want to put the results right in here. So how do we do that? Well, we do it with just a little bit of a macro, and we can create that detail. So let's do that right now. Inside our income statement, we're going to create something called zoom in detail, and that's what we're going to focus on right now. So first thing is with sheet 2, we're going to be focused mostly on sheet 2. I want the last transaction row. This time it's going to be equal to AJ. This time I want the last results row focused here on AJ. So that is the row that we're going to do the focus on. So AJ, the last results row, AJ, that's going to get us our last transaction row. If the last transaction row is less than 3, then exit sub. Nothing we can do if there's no data. Moving on, what I want to do is I now want to run an advanced filter. So dot range, what is the advanced filter? We're going to bring this up so we can see some of the data, and I want this data is here, the criteria is here, and the results are going to come right here. So let's do that. Let's put that in right now. So dot range, the advanced filter, not going to be dot value. It's going to be advanced filter. So we're going to focus on AJ2 through AN and the last transaction row. And it's dot advanced filter. And then we're going to copy that, and we're going to use a criteria range. It's going to be equal to dot range, and of course that criteria that I just focused on you, which is going to be AC2 through AC3. Just that one row. That's all we need. Just that one row right here. AC2 through AC3. That's it. Our results are going to come right here into AP2 through AR2. So we have it here. Not going to be value, so let's get rid of that. And then we're going to focus on the criteria. Copy to range colon equals, what is that range again? AP2 through AR2. Dot range AP2 through AR2. And then let's go ahead and clear that out. And then unique equals true. Okay, that's it for our advanced filter. Now we just need to get the results. So let's just run that real quick. I want to run that and take a look at that. Okay, so that's nice. Now we've got all of our bank interest and everything came here. So now what I want to do is I want to create a named range based on that. So that's it for the zoom in detail. That's all we have to do. So what I want to do is I want to create a named range. Let's use less of a date, but it's not going to matter here. In the income statement, we can probably use, let's go ahead with use this quarter just so we can get a smaller thing. First quarter. So now because labor sold. So let's take a look at that. Now let's get our results and run our results here. I'm going to run that macro right here. Run it, zoom in detail. So now we've got a little bit less results, which is what I want. Now what I want to do is I want to create a named range. Formulas and name manager. And if we take a look at this, we see that we have zoom results. I've created a named range. If we tab over that, it's a dynamic named range. That's what I want. In this particular time, I actually want to include the headers inside that. So we're going to use offset 2, right? We're including the header, so we're not offsetting any rows. Count, I want to count everything from 2 all the way to AP99, and I want to include 3 columns over, 3 columns in this. So that named range is going to actually be our zoom results here. That's exactly what I want to do. So now we have our results here, but now what I want to do is I want to get these results inside here, and I want to display those results here. So how do we do that? Well, we can use our picture tool. Let's create a picture tool. I want to zoom in on just some data. It doesn't really matter what the data is because all I need to do is create a named range. Instead of this, we want to call it that same named range, right? The data is going to be based on the named range. So let's go back into the formulas, exit out of here, formulas, name manager, take a look at that. We're calling that zoom results. So edit it, just to copy that, just to get the name to make sure we have the right name. Close that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this formula to zoom results. Notice how it automatically expands. That's what I want. So now as our zoom results, this is a picture tool. So whatever changes in this data, if I delete something, it's going to also change in the row too. Notice it changed automatically, and it's because we're counting that column, right? So how do we do that? Okay, so now we got that, but now how do we get it in? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, Control C, I'm going to bring it in here, and I'm going to paste it right in here. Perfect, and it's going to paste as a picture, but it's also a dynamic picture, so it's going to change. So now what I want to do is just give this a name, a specific name that we can work with it. I'm going to call details pick. So now that I've given it a name, details pick, I can show and hide this. So what I want to do is when I hover over here, I want to show that details pick. I want to show it right here, right about here, just to the right of that. So how do we do that? Well, we're just a little bit of code. So let's focus on that. All right, so we can reduce this column. We don't need this column that wide, so it gives us some space. All right, so again, as mentioned, we can create macros based on hover, and that's just what I want to do. That macro is going to call show detail, and I want that macro to run. So let's focus on that macro right now and run it. So back into the code, in the income statement, here we have something called show details. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to know the selected row. So the IS row is going to equal to sheet1.range B5. That's the row. I need to get that. I need to know what row to display that in. Dot value. And that's going to be the selected row. Once we have the selected row, then I want to focus on that picture that I just created with sheet1.shapes. What shape is that? It's called the details picture. That we're going to focus on because that's one that we want to place. So the left position of that picture is going to be placed at equal to sheet1.range. I'm going to place it on L. In this case, let's just put it on column L and the IS row and IS row dot left. Also, the top position, dot top, is going to be equal to sheet1.range, L, and IS row dot top. That's going to place it there. And the last thing is dot visible equals MSO true. So we're going to place it. That's the thing. Now it's going to be placed. So perfect. But I only want to display this particular macro when a user hovers over this shape here, when a user hovers over this smaller shape. So how do we do that? Well, again, inside the developer's design mode, this is where we're going to focus on, this one right here, this one. Show details, but not on click, right? I want to actually show when we move the mouse move. That's the one we're going to focus on. So when I do that, I want to show the detail. That's going to show it. Great. So that when I hover over that, of course, we have to get out of the design mode for it to show up. It's already showing up, but notice how it showed up. If we select a different row and we hide it, it's going to show perfect. Notice that we labor for earned. Okay, but we have to add one more thing, right? We have to update this. We need to run the macro. So we can do that. We have to run that macro. But when are we going to run the macro? Why don't we run that macro? When we select it, I want to run the macro to update this. That's the macro we just created just before. That's called let's pull in this macro right here. It's called zoom detail. I want to run that every time we select a row. So copy that and then go into the income statement and then focus on the selection change. Remember, so in selection, so the last thing I want to do is run macro to get account details. Perfect. So now we're getting closer. We're almost done. So now when we select something, we highlight over it and bring it down. Now we've noticed labor earned, technical labor. So we still have to hide it. One more thing we have to do, notice we have to hide it. So, but now it's labor sold, materials for the job. So it's updating, but we do need to hide it. So how can we hide it? Let's write a macro to hide it. So I'm going to go inside and then back into the income statement. And there's one macro. We got to hide the details and then print the report. So to hide details, let's do this. Sheet1.shapes. And then of course, in this case, details pick dot visible equals MSO false. It's going to hide it. So now that we've got it hidden, but now I want to assign this macro to the hover of the bigger shape, right? This is the one right here. Again, we have to go back into the developers design mode. Now we're focused on this bigger shape here, this one here. Hide details, but not on click. Remember, not on click. We can get rid of that. What I want to do is I actually want to show mouse move hide details. So we can clear this out. We're not going to use that. We can clear this out. We're not going to use anything on click. So now when I hover over this, got to get out of design mode, otherwise it's not going to work. Hiding it, it's going to hide it. showing it's going to hide. So now we exit out of it. Now the last thing we do is we don't want these ugly borders, do we? No. So let's take a look into the developers, back into the design mode, click on any one of the shapes, not the group itself, but any shape individually. Go into the developers inside properties. Now we can get rid of the borders. Now border style, none. Do the same thing for this. Border style, none. Now we've got it. Now it's a little bit out of shape. So now we'll go back in, get out of design mode. Now the icon needs to be a little bit more down. So let's move it down just a little bit down. It's a little bit high up. So what we want to do is we want to increase the top. Going into the code here, and then on the selection change income here, selection change, go down here, right top, the more negative, right, the higher it is, the lower, the more. So we want to move it down. So in this case, let's just try 21. Let's see what that looks like. And that looks pretty good. That's pretty good. I like the way that looks. Now when we hover it, shows the details. That's what I want. Great. All right, that's looking good. The last thing, we do need to get a print report done, and then I think we're going to be done. We'll do a run through. But now every account, it's going to show the details of that earned. Technically, the fuel here. Let's take a look at the fuel, gas for various jobs. Office uniform costs is showing. Purchase new uniforms. It shows the detail on hover and it hides it when we move up. And of course, we select everything. Great. Last macro is just, I want to print this report. We need to get the last row to determine it. The last row is going to be based on whatever's in D. So let's do that now. Let's print that report. Last macro, we're going to do inside the income statement, print the report. We're going to focus on that right now. So we're going to do, let's print range as a string, print range as a string, because I need to get that range. And then we're going to define the print range. Print range is equal to sheet1 dot range D5. That's going to be our first one. I want to include all the headers and everything like that. D5 through K and last row. So it's going to be, what is the last row? It would be, in this case, sheet 1, not D, right? Sheet 1, we need to specify that. And we're focused on D, actually, not A. D is going to be, this is going to be the last row with a value. So that's what we have to do. Dot address. So that's what I want. I want the full address of that. That's going to give us our full address. That's going to be the address of the range. So that's going to put it inside, of course, a string. Now we're ready to go. Sheet 1 dot page setup. We can set that print rate. Dot print area is going to be equal to the print range. Once we have that, we're ready to print out. Sheet 1 dot print out. What are we going to be printing out? We can probably leave these blanks. It's going to set the copies. We can leave that at just 1 or whatever we want. Preview, we'll put that as false. We don't want a preview. And then active printer, we'll put that as true. We want the active printer. Print to file no, collate, print to file name, and ignore print areas. We don't want to ignore the print areas, so we put false. We want to keep that. Now let's take a look at that. We can just locate it, but I'm going to right click this print, assign the macro, paste it in, and then click OK. Save our work here, always before running the macro. Click print. It's going to print to the default printer. Mine, of course, is Snagit. It's going to print to that. Let's take a look at that. All right, great. And here it is. Here it is. Here's the Snagit. Here's the print. It printed everything, including the income statement. Very nice. Let's do a run through. Let's make sure we've included everything. Now, notice when we make a change to the quarter, the month, the year, it's going to be processed. When we make a change to, of course, the date, a specific date, it's going to update. We can now actually refresh the report. We can select on any specific line item. We can hover over it, showing any of the details. Even if we use a smaller range or a bigger range, it doesn't matter. We're going to get the entire detail of whatever we want on hover. Awesome. This has been a really, really great training showing you how to create a dynamic income statement with zoom in on hover. I hope you appreciate these trainings. If you do, it would be a great help if you could pick up the 150 workbook application zip file. That is 150 of my best applications for just $56. I'll include the links down below. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.